Hopefully I did not break the game. I just want to talk to my brother's grave. That's all I want. Success. Mr. Nielsen. Ah, is that you, Lloyd? This grave belongs to Lloyd's older brother. You were here to visit him, weren't you? That's right. There's something I wanted to speak with Guy about. You wanted to talk to my brother? Yes, I wish to tell him about the raid, the Declaration of Independence, and President Croix's speech. The people of Crossbell are all facing in a singular direction, irrespective of their own personal emotions. It is for that reason that I am opting to go against the grain and ponder the darkness of the past instead. Darkness of the past? Do you mean? Yes, I do. I'm referring to the murder of your older brother, Detective Guy Bannings. Do you know who killed my brother? I beg your pardon? Guy's death? Where is this coming from? And why now? Or are you saying there's never been a more perfect time? What exactly is it that you know, Mr. Nielsen? Lloyd. Special Support Section. If you wouldn't mind, I'd like for us to head elsewhere so we can review that case together. How does that sound? Yeah, I do in fact want to know how my brother died. All right, if you're willing to, then so are we. Thank you for your cooperation. It just so happens that I have the perfect place in mind. Let's make our way back to the city. Out of curiosity, Mr. Nielsen, why come to Garant specifically? 3 years ago, Guy and I agreed to meet here for another one of our friendly exchanges of information. It was shortly before that meeting that I learned of his death. Oh, that explains it. The secret behind the cult incident, the arrest of Imperial and Republican faction Diet members, the election of a new mayor, the inaugural meeting of the West Samaria Trade Conference, the raid on Crossbell City, and now the Declaration of Crossbellan Independence. While each of these events may appear isolated on the surface, in truth they are closely intertwined. In other words, they are all pieces of a much larger puzzle. So someone is orchestrating things behind the scenes. A larger puzzle? Really? Yes. Were one to unpack the bigger picture behind them, the rest of the pieces would surely fall into place. Doing so should shed new light on the murder of Guy Bannings. That is why I proposed this case review. I understand, however, if you'd rather spare yourself the heartache, Lloyd. No, I'm all right. Lloyd, are you certain of that? Don't forget, time ain't exactly on your side today. We should get this show on the road. That's perfectly fine with me. Let us begin then. First and foremost, we should examine the conditions under which Guy's body was discovered. It was a rainy day 3 years ago at Orcus Tower's construction site. Was it? Did I know that? I feel like this is news to me. Time of death was estimated to be just past dawn, though the body was not discovered until later that night. As for the cause of death, it was hemorrhagic shock. A bullet from an orbital gun pierced him from behind, straight through the heart. Does all of that sound correct? Sure! Yep, that's right. He was shot in the back. Dang, what the heck? Now let us reconstruct the scene of the crime at the time his body was found. To begin, there were signs of a fierce struggle throughout the area. However, the only physical evidence left behind was Guy's body itself. There was a fierce struggle, but Guy was shot from the back? That doesn't really make sense. Not only was his favorite pair of tonfas absent from the locus delicti? I don't speak Latin. But the CPD badge that he so proudly wore on his chest was missing as well. Yes, and it was somehow in the Rivace compound. I have come to understand that this badge was recently recovered. Is it true that it was taken by a member of the organized crime syndicate known as Rivace? Yes, we found it in Marconi's office, and he later confirmed it. The mafioso in question even confessed to lifting the badge off of his body after the cult incident was resolved. I see. However, that was, as you said, after the fact. As far as eyewitnesses go, there were none. At the time, construction work had been suspended and no staff were present at the site. The time of day and environmental factors were also unfavorable. It was the break of dawn, in the midst of a blustery thunderstorm. Because of that, there was no reason for anyone to approach the scene, much less witness the actual murder. To make matters worse, Guy never informed anyone of where he was heading prior to the incident. And that is where my trail goes cold. What you just heard is the entirety of what I've managed to gather these past 3 years. That is, unless you have anything to add, Lloyd. No, I don't think so. You covered everything I knew, too. Mr. Nielsen's penchant for gathering information never ceases to amaze. Yes, though in this case, it would seem Guy was not just a source to him, but a dear friend as well. That may explain why he has such a vested interest in a cold case like this. Very well. Why don't we move on to the case review then? If we're to unravel this mystery, we must first carefully consider our potential culprits. The obvious place to start would be to go over the most likely suspects, namely Rivace and the D therefore G cult. Well, it wasn't either of them though, because Joachim Gwenter, when he turned into a demon and he was like enlightened or whatever, he said he was finally able to understand the mystery of Guy's death, which means he didn't previously know. Do you believe that either of them might be the perpetrator? No. I don't. The mafia said it wasn't them, and the cult should have all been gone except for Joachim. And it couldn't be either of them. No, it couldn't have been either of them. As far as the mafia goes, Marconi denied that he and his men were responsible. Of course, his word only means so much on its own. But Joachim told us that although he arranged for Rivace to kill my brother, they failed. Garcia Rossi admitted it to him when Marconi tried to take credit. There's also no evidence that any of their subordinates went behind their backs to carry out a hit. Also, I don't think any of them would have been strong enough to fight my brother. Not only that, but Guy was also already investigating both the mafia and Joachim. His defenses were up. He would have never put himself in a position where either of them could make an attempt on his life. I just can't fathom that being the case. Gotta agree, chances are slim. Everything we've come to learn about the dude says he wasn't just ballsy, he was a dang good detective too. That he was. I could never believe for a second that he died fighting the mafia or the cult. If his defenses were already up, why would he go to a construction site when he knew no one else would be present? He must have been meeting someone. Which means he was killed by someone he knew? I feel just the same way myself. The elements of this case would appear to point elsewhere. Because, I mean, why else would you go to a construction site during a thunderstorm? I mean, if one of my friends calls me out to a construction site during a thunderstorm, I would be like, no? Are you on drugs? But, very interesting. The theory may have held water prior to the cult incident, but at this point, we can safely rule out both Ravache and the cults. So let's move down the list. Could he have been assassinated on behalf of one of the two major powers? I don't know. By a Diet member from the Imperial or Republican faction, say, or one of the government officials they align with, or perhaps a foreign intelligence officer. Are you about to tell me that Lecter killed my brother? Do you think it's possible that Guy's killer might fit into any of those categories? How am I supposed to know this? I don't know. Why do you hate me? Has Lecter ever even talked about our brother before? I can't recall. Oh. It's highly likely. It's not very likely. It's impossible to say. I feel like it's impossible to say. Like, I really don't feel like I have any way of knowing the answer to this. I don't feel like we can say it's highly likely. Because we don't know, or at least I don't know, if the Imperial or the Republican governments particularly hated my brother. Personally, I feel like Osborne would be pretty upfront about taunting us with our brother's death, because that's the kind of dude he is. Rocksmith is a weird one. I don't know how well he would hide knowing about our brother's death from us. Possible to say, not very likely. It's got to be one of these two. I think I'm going to pick the middle ground. I'm going to pick the middle ground. Because I really don't know either way. No, I think that's pretty unlikely. I feel like the middle ground and the it's impossible to say are really the same answer, just worded slightly differently. It's true there have always been corrupt officials within Crossbell with ties to the two major powers, and it's also true that my brother was quick to push against the injustices they committed. Plus, we can now say for certain that spies from both countries were making frequent visits to Crossbell around that time. But as much as I believed in my brother, he was in no real position to touch them. They couldn't have viewed him as a serious threat. Yeah, there you go. Unfortunately, you're probably right. Oh, okay. So the middle ground was like... So impossible to say means I don't know. Unlikely means no, that's not the cause. And then obviously highly likely is like, yeah, they definitely assassinated my brother for some reason. Okay, I understand. They were worded a little awkwardly. As much as I hate to admit it, either nation could apply tremendous pressure on the CPD through the state government if they really wanted to. Especially under the old administration when Guy was alive. It would have been far too easy. I got it right. That's what matters. There you go. That is all that matters at the end of the day. Yeah, it just doesn't fit. Why go to the effort of luring out and killing one single detective when bureaucratic red tape is effective enough as it is? A high-risk, low-reward maneuver like that just wouldn't have been worth it, no matter how much of a thorn in their side he was. And also, why assassinate just Guy? Why not assassinate Dudley and Arios while you're at it? Let's say and I'm just talking hypotheticals here, that Lloyd's bro was in contact with one of those guys, he still wouldn't walk into an obvious trap. It's the same deal as the Mafia. I concur. Impressively deduced. I have nothing more to say on this subject. With that, let's move on to our final possibilities. Out of the sizable pool of potential suspects, you've eliminated every one of them so far. Tell me then, who else do you suppose could fit the profile of Guy's killer? It had to be someone who was at least as strong as our brother. And it had to be someone who was close to our brother to lure him out to such a dumb location. Someone from Ouroboros. Someone from the CPD. I think it was a personal acquaintance. Ouroboros, I falls into the same category as the Empire and the Republic for me. Someone from the CPD, I guess? I'm going to say a personal acquaintance. It should be one of these two, but I'm going to bet on a personal acquaintance. Guy was still wary of them, no doubt, but it had to have been someone he knew well. That's the only answer that fits. Huh? You serious? And what brings you to that conclusion? Why else would you go to a freaking construction site when you're already on guard? Well, first of all, Guy never revealed to anyone where he was going beforehand. That leads me to believe that he was confident in his ability to handle the situation alone. The only reason he would feel that way is if he was meeting someone he knew personally. That's true. Whether Guy was asked to go there or whether the meeting was his idea is impossible to say. I hadn't considered that Guy asked someone to meet him. I guess that is a possibility. But consider where they met, an empty construction site. Clearly, whatever they planned to discuss was important. They didn't want anybody to hear what they were talking about. It's possible, the conversation went sideways, that it broke down to the point of no return. Maybe that's why the killer took his life. What conversation would that be? I don't know. Honestly, I don't have the slightest clue. But whatever it was, it cost him his life. And that means it was grave enough to silence him forever. I don't use this word lightly, but it might have been linked to a deep conspiracy of some kind. A conspiracy? When we began this review, you said that unpacking the bigger picture could shed new light on the case. At that moment, I felt like something clicked, way in the back of my mind. Did you now? Is Dieter Kreuss actually, legitimately evil, and so is Mariabelle? I've been suspecting since, either last stream or the stream before? I can't get past the idea that my brother was closing in on some kind of secret plot. A plot concocted by somebody connected to the D Therefore G cult, the Mafia, the Empire, and the Republic, yet also separate from them. Whoever it was, they couldn't allow Guy to interfere. And chances are, that conspiracy is still alive and well to this day. Doesn't that sound like the most logical explanation? Connected, yet also separate? And you say this conspiracy is still ongoing? It's hard to draw any other conclusion. The killer is still at large, after all. That fact alone is enough to tell me whatever they killed Guy over is a long ways from settled. Mr. Nielsen? Sorry, was that too far-fetched? No, not at all. I think your reasoning is perfectly sound. Let me ask you this, Lloyd. As we were reviewing this case, did any particular suspect come to mind? One who could, in theory, have called Guy out to that construction site and murdered him 3 years ago? No, unfortunately not. To his credit, Guy was popular. Even if we narrow it down to those he knew personally, that's still a lot of people. Yeah, I feel like we're constantly running into people our brother was friends with. I mean, today we learned our brother was friends with you. Didn't know that prior to now. There are also 2 other key details. His back was turned when it happened, and his tonfas were removed from the scene afterward. So that means the tonfas are either a trophy of some kind, which would be weird, or there would have been marks on the tonfas that would like show like what weapon was used against him or something. Like markings that would let you know for sure how he was killed and who killed him. I suspect that both of those facts are vital to figuring out what really happened that day. Then again, if that evidence alone was enough to identify the killer, the 1st Division would have solved this case 3 years ago. That's a fair assessment. Unfortunately, not every clue has been revealed, and so the culprit cannot yet be identified. However, I do think one thing has made itself clear. The only person who can uncover those final missing pieces and solve this puzzle is you, Lloyd. Mr. Nielsen. Right, and I intend to do just that. Glad to hear it. It's strange. I suddenly feel as though I've made good on my promise to share intel with Guy here 3 years ago. I owe you all my deepest gratitude for indulging me with this review session. Not at all. If anything, we should be the ones thanking you for this. You're too kind. Now if you'll excuse me, I greatly anticipate hearing about your future exploits, SSS. So we still don't know who killed Guy. We just know that it was someone who Guy trusted. I get the sense that Mr. Nielsen was hoping to help us more than the other way around. You might be onto something, Tio. Keeping his promise to my brother may have been his real goal. I'm glad we took the time to speak with him. I can't help but agree. You said it. Now come on, let's get cracking. All that hashing out's got me fired up. Yeah, next stop, the Don's room in the old Ravache building. It's time to see what information we can drag out of Lecter. I have so many questions now, though.